Welcome, connoisseurs of fine common cardboard, to today's live stream and to this set review for the color white from the set Commander Masters for Competitive Pauper Commander. My name is Papa Pauper, also Ryan, and I've got my friend Brownie here to walk us through this incredible new set and the implications for the color white. Brownie is the mono white maester himself, so I'm blessed to have such a fine mind here along with us today to guide us through some of these new cards that we've gotten. So how you doing today, Brownie? Doing a quick audio check here. Audio check, 1 2 1 2.
I got you back. I lost
There
you
we
when you
go.
went.
Yeah, we may have had a little bit of an audio problem there. For those of you who are listening, let's see. Okay, so we had our mics all switched off. So let's start right back from the beginning here. Welcome, connoisseurs of fine common cardboard, to today's live stream and to this set review for Commander Masters. I've got my buddy Brownie here, the mono white maester himself, to walk us through some of the incredible new cards that we've gotten from this incredibly powerful new set. So how you doing today, Brownie?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
You know, we're hanging in there. Y'all may have stopped by for last night's live stream. I was so wasted coming back from this festival, which took a long time to get there, a long time to get back. It was Shambhala up in British Columbia, up in Canada, and on the way there, I left on Wednesday night. We got there Thursday morning and we were in line for 12 hours to get into the festival. So I actually was like setting up camp at 11 p.m. at night. And then you go into the festival and it's like, 4 days of just like going insanely hard. And so, and then the drive back, the RCMP, which is the Canadian Police, had set up some checkpoints to check people as they were coming out, and it dramatically slowed down our departure and meant that on top of the 9 hours of driving that we had to do, we waited 5 hours to get out. So I am running on fumes. And on top of that, and this is the other goofy thing. So Friday comes around, we start getting spoilers, right? And I turn on my phone for the first time, and I get like 12 messages, direct messages with people in pictures, dread return, gutter snipe, all the glitters. And I'm just like, holy shit, I need to like sit down and focus for a second. So I'm like trying to use what limited data I have to like, make these Twitter posts and to respond to people. I run out of data and I got to pay for more data, and I've got like my earplugs in so the music isn't bleeding through, and I've got my backpack set up in my tent. So I'm sitting there with my thumbs. They're just starting to get sore as I'm designing little Canva things. And it was hectic. And so anyways, I get back and I've got like the busiest work week, and I'm going to be streaming every day this week. So if I'm frazzled, if my words come out stuttery, y'all know why, because I'm not firing on all cylinders. But that's why we got a co-host today. Brownie, backpack us, please.
Absolutely. Ryan, I got you. Thank you so much for having me. You can lean on me. I can ramble about white cards all night. So
you're the perfect
just take
person to have on for this. Yeah, truly. And we're gonna have a good time today. It's we've got some really interesting cards downshifted, some just extraordinarily powerful stuff, things that weren't on my wish list even, for my downshift wish list, which I've been maintaining for better part of like 7 or 8 years now. And so, yeah. So with that, just want to thank everybody for being here. We're going to launch right into this set review. So let's swoop on over here. And the first one that we got to talk about, I think
first question for Watsy is, how dare you?
Yeah, seriously. This was not on my radar to get this card. It wasn't even a card that I had in my sort of like pipe dream category. This card is cranial plating in white, but more. And generally speaking, black decks don't have a way to get cranial plating back. White decks have a ton of ways to get all the glitters back. And this card is insane.
We can tutor for it, we can recur it, and typically This is an effect that is very popular even in mono white for cEDH. The mono white typically wants to be on a lot of artifacts and a lot of enchantments. A lot of the removal, the most premium removal for mono white, typically is enchantments, and so enchantments that stay in play, like a Journey to Nowhere or an Oblivion Ring,
Yeah.
and passivism effects. So, I mean, you can very casually just cast this for 2 and probably pump a creature easily +5/+5,
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
more.
Oh yeah.
I
I mean the
mean, it's not hard.
floor on this card is higher than it is on cranial plating. And it's a very strong card. Now, cranial plating has other text. You can swap it around on other things. If the creature dies, it doesn't matter. You can still attach it. But I think it's an apt comparison because when I saw this card downshifted, the thought was this is our bomb payoff for just doing what our deck wants to do. And for mid-range white decks that are going to want to play a ton of mana rocks to ensure that they can always cast their commander, I'm looking at cards like Mentor of the Meek, where you're going to want to have a lot of mana, and you're going to get paid off the moment you draw this by just
Yep.
turning any one of your stupid flyers that has either vigilance or lifelink or whatever, first strike or something, into an absolute monster. And that's really where cranial plating shines, is that you freely slip this card into your deck, and then you're ramping because that's what you want to do in mid-range, and then you're killing people with this card that basically took no work to be good. It's just a win condition in your deck.
It is, and I'm thinking about other decks that typically get played a lot in our meta. So, for example, like Great Desert Prospector
Oh my
loves this card.
god. Oh,
GDP Power Stones maybe on 6, right? And that's not including any enchantments in play, artifact creatures
ugh.
that we're helping to ramp. And what GDP is typically trying to do is go wide and buff the board. And this gets a little bit into mono white design. So let me back up a little bit and talk about that.
Yeah.
So at higher rarities, what WotC has been doing with white, and especially mono white, because I do think that they think a little bit about that as well. Like they're not just thinking about how it is as a support color. There's a lot of effects that are printed at higher rarity that reward you for going tall and wide at the same time. So we have cards like Paladin class, which will buff your board +1/+1, but then it will also buff a creature +1/+1 for each attacking creature. So you get one really big dude, right? And so this card is similar to that in the sense, like in lists like GDP, where you're going to have a ton of creatures. A bunch of them are probably going to be artifacts. Some of your creatures might even be enchantment creatures. You're going to have enchantment removal. You're going to have enchantment buffs. You're going to have artifact ramp. This is going to give you exactly that kind of bomb and at 2 mana. I mean, the rate is amazing for this. When you look at comparable buffs that are like +3 or more, you're looking at paying 5 mana usually. I had a lot of cards that I thought were going to get downshifted. This was not one of them. I thought this was stuck it on. And just to mention 60 card pauper, I play mono white heroic. I cannot wait to put this in mono white heroic, to be perfectly honest with you, because I think it's
Yeah.
also going to be fun there.
Well, it's kind of wild. 60 card popper, just to briefly deviate, is going to get completely changed forever by this set.
Yeah.
And in ways that are really interesting. You've got like Reanimator is an enormous beneficiary of this set
Yeah.
with Dread Return. You've got Boggles, which is a really important foil to yeah, Pauper Masters, exactly. Yeah, you've got cards like Foil, or sorry, not Foil, but you've got Boggles, which is a foil to burn and to aggressive damage-based strategies, because you've got Soul, what is it called? Soul Link, and you've got Life Link. I think those are the
Yep.
two. Spirit Link, and Life Link, and you've got Armadillo Cloak, and so it's going to balance things out in a way that Pauper really needed. It needed things that were going to compete with Burn, basically, with not just Burn but Cold Oath or Red. So pretty incredible what it's going to do there. It's going to break the format for a little bit probably because we got cheaper sweepers, we got these incredibly powerful threats. And the list goes on. It's very strong. We've got Kunks. Welcome, my friend. Fyndhorn, you missed it on the morning podcast that Drown in Sorrow might see a lot of play at first, but it's not as good as we all think it is, like Bowmasters. I think Drown in Sorrow is nowhere near Bowmasters. But Bowmasters is not a common.
Yeah.
Bowmasters is a very broken rare. Drown in Sorrow is a very reasonable and somewhat undercosted sweeper in a format where -2/-2 is similar to Wrath of God.
Right.
And so I think Drown in Sorrow is phenomenal. It's basically like we got Fiery Cannonade Plus in black. So it's going to do a lot of work, and it's going to hose gut decks, unfortunately. I think that card is going to do a lot of work.
It is going to do a lot of work there, and I think to touch on that briefly, I think I agree with Kunks. We're probably going to see, it's a new card, so people are going to play a lot of this. This is a point that Gator has made as well. I think they talked about it on the Common Theory podcast as well. There are some cards that just because they're new, people are going to start playing them, right? Like, let's just see what it does, because you don't know until you try. That said, the reason that I think Drown in Sorrow, to deviate for a moment, has become much more impactful is because me as a mono white brewer, or people who are playing more like a go wide strategy, a lot of low to the ground creatures, I now have to think about Ariel, another great example. I have to think about what am I going to do to protect my board? Now, typically I would have used things like your temple is under attack for indestructible, or I would have used like Pay No Heed, which prevents damage. I will always use
Prismatic Strands, Dawn Charm.
And Prismatic Strands probably will never go away because it's such a premium card. But I have to start thinking about like what are those like secondary protection pieces in my decks. And I don't think I can run like the damage prevention, and I don't think I can run like indestructible. I think now I have to look at toughness buffs because of this. It's not so much that it's different than what we had, it's just that now there's more of them. So like you can run this plus Arms of Hadar plus Evankar's Justice.
There's
like,
a
it
reason,
just gives you
there's a reason why I diversify in my control and mid-range decks when it comes to sweepers. And it's because these -2/-2 are so devastating against against gut decks that might look my way, right? And whether they're Rakdos or Boros. And so, the fact that it's -2, it's a status status modifier, is really stretching white hard, because the protection spells don't work, right? The damage prevention doesn't work. If you go for a buff, then you're looking at like maybe Guardian's Pledge, but then those don't hit your skeletons. You're really starting to look at a pretty narrow set of answers, and they're kind of expensive. They're not the kind of thing that you can develop your board and hold them up, right?
So I think we're likely to play more of now, and if you want to pull it up, feel free. One example is going to be Remotion Rally. Remotion Rally is your team +1/+1, and you tap a creature to play it. So that one, I think, just in terms of like the cost, like if somebody goes for this and I'm tapped out, I can just tap down a creature and then I'm good to go. That's the one.
This is a classic in Boros Bully from back in the day. But Boros Bully suffered from the same problem. When I was playing a lot of Boros Bully when it first came out, it was always a question of, do you play Luma Threadfield? Do you play Remosian Rally? Do you play Prismatic Strands? Because the Tron decks had anything from Fiery Cannonade to eventually, all sorts of different stuff, right? They had answers for each and every one of those things. So this seems like a perfectly reasonable thing, especially because gut isn't swinging, often.
Yes. The other one I'm looking at, and this one is also premium rate, is Shields of Velisfell. Now, Shields of Velisfell I really only considered good because it got around Fiery Cannonade and Breath Weapon, right?
Yep.
Now, because I have to think about toughness, the other mode on it, which says your creatures get +0/+1, it's not really a mode, it's just the other effect, right? There's two effects, is now a lot more relevant.
And it's 1 mana.
Right. So I think, whereas before I was like, I only care about half of this card, now I care about both. Now it's probably going to be used much more widely. Now it's essentially a 1 mana counter spell for a sweeper.
Yep.
with the exception being it isn't really a counterspell because it might still hit my opponents but keep my board. And the
Yep.
reality is mono white, especially one of the limitations is, and I've been talking a lot about this with some folks in our servers who do a lot of mono white brewing. Sweepers are devastating.
Yep.
We are board state deck. It's what mono white
Yep.
does. We're not a
Yep.
spell slinger color. So what's going to happen is somebody casts a sweeper, we're toast. So we have to have answers for it. Sometimes we won't, but when we do, these will be good payoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely cards to consider. The decks are going to get pulled in a lot of different directions because this doesn't save you against Pestilence. It doesn't save you against Crypt Rats. It's not going to save you against a lot of the other things that are out there, but it will save you against Arms of Hadar, which is popular, and then Drown in Sorrow is going to be everywhere. It'll also save you against Fiery Cannonade still, so it does still work on that. And the creature types is particularly excellent for the Breath Weapon, the Fiery Cannonade. Now that we don't have Eyeblight Massacre, it's Drown in Sorrow is going to be replacing that in decks that play it. Then this will still work. So, yeah, that's great.
Yep.
So let's swap back here to the white. It's good to treat these things all in context because we're basically this Commander Masters has introduced so many different things that the implications of it are quite wide and big. I mean, there's significant magnitude and breadth of impact.
Yep.
So you were talking a little bit about the design concepts in white and what they're
Yes.
pushing for. And this artifact element of all the glitters is really unusual to me in my mind. Enchantments make sense. Artifacts, like there have been cards in the past where white has interacted with artifacts to get them back, to stack them on your deck. But a payoff, that's really quite interesting. So tell us a little bit about what you think is coming down the line and
Yeah.
where WotC's mind is at with this.
So Mark Rosewater has done several Drive to Work podcasts with over the last couple of years with folks who have been in charge of white on the Color Council. So the Color Council gets together and sort of advises on like sort of advises on mechanics. So if a new mechanic gets introduced, like where does it seem to make the most sense?
Right.
They aren't designers, but they advise, is my understanding. And white has struggled for a little while with its identities, especially in Commander. So it's always had this identity where it's kind of playing a lot of low to the ground creatures, go wide. It's kind of always done that, and then hopefully dropping like a bigger payoff towards the end of the game. But exactly what is it doing like other colors do? Like when we think of blue, we think of it as the control color, and and when we think of red, we think of it as like super fast and hyper aggro. Like what is white's exact thing? And a couple of things that they've come up with. One is it's really the color of ETB. And so what you see at lower rarities is a lot of ETB value. Now you see that in all colors, but white has some particularly good ones. And then as you go up in rarities, you see even better ones. You start seeing tutors, you start seeing doublers of that, like panharmonicon effects. Just recently they printed Elish Norn, who can actually stifle ETB effects, which is like, whoa. So you see a lot more of that. Having said that, the other thing that they've been looking at a lot is making white's color identity tied more to artifacts, specifically artifact recursion.
Yep.
And so I think, and I don't know if this is where we're going next. Are we going to the new commander here, or are we going somewhere else?
So we're gonna work our way through the commons first, and then we'll go on through our uncommons, and we'll wrap around basically to what you're talking about right now. Yeah, totally.
The thing that I think is important to remember here is because of some of these rarity downshifts, we are seeing what WotC wants to do with white, and the way that they're signaling that is by making these effects that deal with artifacts and artifact recursion more available at lower rarities so that players can draft them. And they can just, not even as your commander, just like throw them in your deck.
Yeah.
And then you get to see how they work. And so we get a lot of this. So this is a payoff for playing artifacts.
It's a big signal, right? I mean, this is a massive signal that they're like, we want people to frequently, because it's a common, right? So they're going to be drafting. you could draft like 3 of these.
Yes.
I mean, you could draft 3 of this card. That's a
Yeah.
huge signal as to what they want white to be doing, which is interesting because in some ways white does a lot. Um, the color pie. So white is the color that destroys anything, destroys all of the things all at once. Um,
Mhm.
it is the color of flickering. It's the color of
Mhm.
ETBs. It's the color of reanimation. It's
Yep.
also a color of go wide, and it's a color of go tall. It's a color of
Right.
protection. It's like, wow, what doesn't it do? And it's like, well, it doesn't really counter spells, but it
Right.
also has all these ways to sort of soft counter them,
Right.
which is to say, I'm not going to counter that spell, but you aren't going to be able to play it, because the other thing that white does is it has stacks effects, things that limit your ability to play the game, or primarily through that. Like white stacks is going to tend to be you can't do your thing, as opposed to black stacks, which is going to be more about resource disparity, asymmetric resource disparity, right?
Yep.
And things of that nature. So my question is like, why, if white is already doing so much,
Mhm.
particularly in unrestricted rarity formats, right, where you really do get a lot. I mean, it's some of the best removal spells ever printed. Um, yeah, what are your thoughts
So,
on that?
well, so artifact synergies are being pushed a bit into each color. With red and black, you see a little bit more treasure token generation. Red especially can just like passively generate tokens very easily. Blue can do a little bit of that as well. And blue still has a lot of really good artifact synergies. Like, I mean, just play a deck full of artifacts and do very well with it.
Yep.
Green is getting a little bit of artifact synergy as well, which typically, historically, it didn't. But I think they're seeing white as the artifact recursion or animation color, primarily because there have in the past, like if you dig deeper into Magic history,
Yeah.
you can see these kind of effects. Even at common, like Remember the Fallen is
Yep.
one that just comes to mind. We have Salvage Scout. We have oh, it's not Frantic Search. I know it's not, but
Frantic
there's another one.
salvage.
Frantic Salvage. That's it. So I mean, you have these there. So it's always had this kind of artifact synergy. I think now they're going to be a little bit more intentional about
Yeah.
it. And the
Even
next thing is go
Mhm.
ahead.
Even Starnheim Courser, right, reduces the
Yeah.
cost of artifacts. It's like, oh,
Yep.
interesting. So in some ways, like the writing was on the wall as to what they were trying to do, because they've been signaling that they want
Yep.
white to be about artifacts. Very interesting, because um, black is about artifacts and about sacrificing them.
Right.
Red is about artifacts in terms of sacrificing them, paying them off, utilizing them in different ways. You've got blue, which is about very much about artifacts, but usually more as
Mhm.
part of a payoff, right? Like you have
Yep.
cards that are like Urza, or you're going to
Yep.
have cards like Kappa Cannoneer, or like 8 cast decks and Legacy that are very artifact focused. So, and then green is more about basically destroying them, right? That's kind of the only way that it has any. It doesn't really do artifice. So then white being the one that recovers them. So basically, every color has some interaction with artifacts, but it's clear that they're going to try and amplify that with white. Um,
Yeah, I mean, and there's cards like I mean, at this point, I feel like it's almost off the table at what they could downshift. But I'm like, in a couple of years, are we going to get something like Savin's Reclamation at common? I mean,
yeah,
it
yeah,
could be built any 3 or less permanent, and
yep,
you can flash it back and you can copy it. Right.
yeah.
I mean, when we're seeing more of these effects being printed at lower rarities, it does make me wonder. This is just like a fantastic card.
So
There's a lot of
pushed.
decks that could just play it because you can tutor it, you just play it, and it's
Yeah,
just incredible value. This
yeah.
was one of the more impactful ones. When I saw this,
Oh,
I think I
dude.
dropped it when I saw this.
Yeah,
Just
no,
like
no, it
what?
was the same for me. I was like walking around kind of sleepily, in camp. I was like getting all my stuff together, and then like turned on my phone and got this blitz of messages. And when I saw all the glitters, I was like, What? Like, why?
Gotta be.
Yeah, yeah. So very powerful card. I'm very excited to, one of the Let's builds that I'm eager to do with you one of these days soon is to do a Mentor of the Meek, and I think this is a great home for that because it's a deck that wants to ramp, to have lots of mana. And of course, when you lean into playing lots of one power, cheap one power creatures that can trip, then they're gonna have flying. Like there's like 18 one mana evasive creatures in white. Like put this on a Soltari Foot Soldier, unblockable, Giga Chad 1/1, and all the the 3 power Auramancer cards that get back stuff. They also draw cards, so you're not everything about this wants to play with all the glitters. So I'm really excited to do that. We've got a bunch of different comments in chat here. We've got Clay here masquerading as me. He's our other co-host, our shadow co-host. Derpy mentioned, to me at least, it's a fair version of all the other colors. It doesn't do anything well, but it's cheap and effective. Yeah, I suppose so. It does feel like it does sweepers pretty well, although in our color pie it doesn't. That's one of the weaknesses of white in this format, is that it doesn't get access to one of its most like iconic things, which is Wrath of God. And I don't know, maybe that's something we'll get something someday, like a Holy Light, except it does -2/2, and maybe it's like 4 mana or something. That'd be kind of an interesting design space. I could see them doing that. And then we've got Sniff House saying, all the glitters downshift blew me away. Absolutely insane. Yep, totally cracked. And then Clay says, wait, what? A Let's Brew with one of the CC server's newest mods? Yeah. For those of you that don't know, Brownie is our newest mod in the Common Connoisseurs. So you'll be seeing him around here and elsewhere. Somebody we hold in high esteem and wanted to bring into the light. So well, why don't we move on to the next one here? We've talked a bunch about all the glitters. This is obviously cracked. Definitely going to want to be looking to play this in your white decks. Man, I was just thinking the other deck that this is really gross in is going to be Cephalopod Sentry. It is going to make that card one-shot people like so easily. It's so good.
Yeah, any Azorius deck, like big mana Azorius deck. So I mean, think like gosh, even E-Sphinx. Like if E-Sphinx cascades into this, that's great. Like I'll take it.
Oh yeah, like slap this onto a striped Riverwinder.
Yeah.
Or a Cold Water Snapper, or any of the other hexproof things that they do. Yeah, it's real good. It's real good. Oh, and let's not forget the Satyr Enchanter loves this shit.
Yes.
Satyr Enchanter is like, oh wait, we get another Ancestral Mask in our deck. Cool, sweet, sick. So yeah, definitely great. Yeah. All right, moving on to the next one here. We've got Generous Gift. You all know it. You've probably played this card plenty or had it played against you. This card ranks really high for me because white has needed efficient, instant speed, destruction effects quite badly to balance out the fact that white removal isn't what it is in cPDH, or hasn't been what it is in cPDH as what it is in other formats. In other formats, you've got Swords to Plowshares, you've got Path to Exile, right? These really efficient, instant speed, fairly unconditional cards, right? And Generous Gift is creeping that direction. The 3/3 kind of doesn't matter, right? It does matter in some ways, but destroy target permanent means lands. Yeah, it's like, this card is very good. This card is very, very good. What are your thoughts when you saw this? Is this going to signal a bigger trend towards better white removal? Maybe even getting something akin to Swords or Plow at some point in time? Or do you think this is maybe indicating that we're going to have kind of expensive answer all type stuff like O-Ring kind of effects?
Yeah. So I think this does point in the direction of some better removal for white at common. Typically, the removal is some kind of conditional.
Yep.
So what I like about this is that it does a very classically like white thing. So what it's going to do is it's going to remove something, but it's going to give the person who's losing their resource an upside. That is, I mean, so even with Swords to Plowshares, right? It's going to give somebody life equal to creature's power. You're going to see, we have in our format now, and it's actually a spell I'm a little bit more high on recently, is Last Breath.
Oh yeah,
Exile target creature power 2 or less. Its controller
Exile.
gains 4 life.
2
Yeah,
mana, splashable. That
exactly.
card is gasoline. It kills every combo creature in the whole format.
Exactly. Yeah. When I saw this, my reaction was, hmm. And the reason my reaction was that was I do think this is good. I think that the best piece of this is that it says instant.
Yep,
That is
that's
really the
huge. That's
best
it.
thing.
Yeah.
So we get some instant speed removal that can hit anything. So that's definitely a plus. Couple of things that I think are less exciting about it is white does already at common have a number of exile effects.
Yep.
And now when you're looking at you talked about this in your black review yesterday. Now that we have things like Dread Return, destroy feels a lot more difficult. I think
Yep.
you're right in the sense that this is probably hitting a land. Gretchen is going to try to combo. I'm going to blow up the land.
Hmm.
Um, that's probably what this hits, and I'm giving Gretchen a 3/3 elephant, and that's fine. I'll take that trade.
Oh yeah.
Um, but one spell that I really like, and you see played in a lot of white and white X decks, is Angelic Purge.
Yep. That's
And
a
I
great
think
card.
even though it's sorcery speed, and I understand the shortcomings of that, it's the fact that it can exile just about anything that's a problem. That's really where I think the upside is of a thing like this, and we already had it. So I think again, this is going to be one of those cards that a lot of people are going to try because it's new. Let's see how it plays. I think some decks are going to be able to play it more profitably than others,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm excited for it because it's instant speed. I think maybe it signals toward a little bit better removal at common
I sure hope
for
so.
white.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
white really needs to get better removal. It's not going to get. I don't think it's going to get sweepers. I don't think that's something we can expect out of common in white. We might get something at some point. Maybe like -2/-2 to all non-white creatures kind of thing. Maybe.
right,
But even that's like kind of busted because if you're in a white deck, that means you're not affected by it, and like most of your opponent's stuff is affected by it. So
right.
seems like removal is where it's going to be headed towards, and generous gift being instant speed. I think you're totally right. Like that is the best part of this, right? It's the fact that it's permanent and it's instant speed. The 3 mana part, not phenomenal. The fact that it gives him a 3/3, which actually stonewalls a lot of white threats, also not phenomenal. But I still think that that those two elements remain very important. Because the
Yeah,
instant speed part of it is something that white really has struggled with. It's not a color that seems to interact on the stack very well, at least in our format. You've
no,
got
I think
great removal like Journey to Nowhere. You've got your Oblivion Ring. You've got Angelic Purge. You have a lot of good removal, but it's sorcery speed, so you have to be doing everything during your turn.
correct. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think the stack interaction is going to change a lot.
Yeah,
White is not a color that cares as much about the stack.
yeah,
And so I don't think we see a ton of this, and that's why even though this is instant speed, we're seeing it's 3 mana and it's giving a pretty sizable payoff. I don't know that I want to give Gut a 3/3.
you
You
don't want
see
to
what I
give
mean?
Gut a 3/3. There's a whole bunch of decks you don't want to give a 3/3. If it's killing a Gretchen land, it helps. That's fine. But yeah, a 3/3 is not nothing.
Right. So there's a lot of there's some pros and cons with this one. I definitely think throw it in your decks and try it, but I also think there might be some field bads. And I think sometimes when it does the thing at instant speed that you want it to do, it's going to be great. But white, if you're playing white and you're looking for that kind of reactivity, you probably should be playing blue because that's what blue is there for.
Yeah, yeah,
White plays more premium removal at sorcery speed. Even if you were to look into standard right now, which kind of tells it like we kind of live in standard in a sense because those cards end up being cards that we use in our
yep,
format.
yep.
Most of the most premium removal in white in standard right now is Lay Down Arms, which is 1 mana, exile something equal whose mana value is equal to the number of planes you control, and it's
Mm,
sorcery speed.
wow, that's
And then ossification, which is a 2 mana O-ring that you put on a land and it exiles a creature or a
okay.
planeswalker.
So like
So it's
chain to a rock kind of.
yeah, and so those are the best ones. There's March of Otherworldly Light, but it's not as common. It is instant speed, but you got to like exile cards, and it's very expensive. And that's usually what happens with white. When we get that more premium instant speed removal, we're looking at something that's probably going to cost a bit more.
Yeah, that makes sense. Clay also mentioned you can also give yourself a 3/3, which is definitely something worth mentioning. That I think is an important element to consider as well. So yeah, we have like a bad swords to plowshares here. Exile card with mana value less than or equal to the number of planes its controller gains 3 life. Yeah, for sure. So this card, not really a white staple, I would say, but it will see play on a lot of decks,
Yep.
and it will do its job. Um, Sometimes it'll be exemplary, and sometimes it'll feel not so good. But
Yep.
every removal spell in the format is kind of that way, except for maybe like Go for the Throat. Go for the Throat is like one of the only ones where you're kind of like always gonna get your money out of it, right? It's gonna go a long ways. It's just one of the best removal spells we have. Um, you know, Victim of Night also that way. But yeah, like Cast Down, Doomblade, these cards sometimes don't hit what you want, and that feels bad. But that's removal in our format, so I think this is just joining those cards. But you're also getting this ability to deal with problematic permanence in a way that's really awesome. So yeah, so we've got Generous Gift here. Moving on to the next one, we've got Mirrorsmith, and I honestly don't have a lot to say about this. Um,
Yeah.
the For one thing, this card is going to be disgusting in Mentor of the Meek. That is the only thing that really comes to mind, because it's giving us 1/1s that are going to enter the battlefield and draw us cards when we ramp. It's cheap. It produces tons of bodies passively, and in a very inexpensive way. This card has been used in some combos. Is that right?
Can be, yeah, because I mean, with Ash Nods, it goes mana positive.
Oh, yes. Got it. Yep, yep. So every time you play your Mirror Retriever, you're going to pay 1. You're going to get a 1/1. You can sack the 1/1 for 1 additional mana, sack the Mirror Retriever. Yeah, okay. So this is a combo card with Teshar.
Yep.
And this is also just a generically good mid range card. I really like this a lot, actually. This is going to be a great card in Sludge Strider, now that I think about it. Big mana combo deck that needs bodies to block, has tons of mana, right? But what do you think when you see this card? What comes to mind?
Funny enough, I did have I was working on a Mirrorsmith deck a few months back as commander.
As the
So to
commander,
see,
no way.
so to see it downshifted is interesting. I definitely think it's better in the command zone, right? Just because it's
Yep,
there,
yep.
and you can build a game plan around it. At the same time, I could see how this could work in Mentor. I do think the decks that want this are going to be the ones that are already playing artifact synergies. So I think you're
Yep.
going to see it show up potentially in E-Sphinx, because it's going to help with that affinity count. I do think that this can be
Oh, that's
played
very
by
good.
Subsequent Century. This is a GDP card because GDP cares about a few things. It cares about creatures. It does, in a sense,
Wow.
care about our count, and it can use the power stones to pay the cost.
Wow, that's actually really gross. Wow,
Yep.
GDP is getting a lot of really powerful stuff.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it's
Yeah,
it's
like
one of
it's gonna play all 3 of the cards we just brought up.
yeah, it absolutely could. It absolutely could. Yep.
Huh. That's fascinating. Okay. So, is there much else to say about this one? Like, what?
Gator mentioning in the chat that this is a gut card, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely, because gut wants to play artifacts, wants to sack artifacts, wants
It's
to
making
get more
bodies.
artifacts to sack. Yeah, this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
absolutely a gut card. I'm sure that there are other decks that I'm not thinking of right now where
Yeah.
this is going to be good to care about those tokens.
Yep. Yep.
I'm going to be playing this this is not one of my competitive decks, but Rosy Cotton of South Lane, which came out in Lord of the Rings, cares about tokens entering the battlefield.
Yeah.
So this is one that I would play
Yep.
to help, because the one thing I always hated about the deck was like, oh, when I gotta play artifacts, nothing happens. Well, now I get
Uh-huh.
something.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
I, this is also searchable with a Militia Bugler.
Yep.
And you can take it out of the yard with an Airlift Chaplain, which is
Yep.
relevant.
Yep.
So it's a solid card.
And it's a human, which is a relevant creature type. It's a human that makes non-humans, which is
Yeah.
important for cards like Of One Mind,
Hmm.
because Of One Mind is asking you to have a human and a non-human. So it's kind of like TPI in that way. It just seems very generically strong, and I think in Gut, if you were talking about it for there, Gut is always looking for ways to make more than one thing off of one card, right? So more than one body off of one card, more than one object off of one card. It might be treasures, it might be food, it could be all sorts of different stuff that it can sacrifice to Gut. And so Muirsmith does strike me as an engine, right? It's going to be a
Yep.
little bit slower, but it's going to make an endless string of bodies, and I think that's going to be really appealing to Gut players in Boros. So definitely exciting. Gator says, I find this to be a weird card that it's better, that is better than it reads. Testing it in Gut and other decks. Yep, I think it is. I actually think this reads quite well. I and I think it's actually better than maybe people will anticipate. Yeah, I would agree with that statement. Testing it, not sure if it'll work. Testing it in Dargo, so Dargo White, so maybe like a Dargo Keleth type build. I could see that. The mana cost for it, the fact that it does cost you a little bit of mana to make your things, is going to be restrictive. I imagine that could be a problem in Gut because Gut doesn't play a ton of lands. I think Gator, your deck runs 33 lands, so having extra mana may not be part of the picture, but it could be, and it certainly is enticing. And the fact that it's kind of like in my version of Rakdos Gut, so Gut Iron Throne, I do allocate slots for cards that repeatedly make treasure over and over and over again, and I allocate those slots to them over cards like, for example, Carrier Thrall, which is a 2 mana card that's going to make two bodies, right? Well, I would rather have something like Beamtown Beatstick because Beamtown Beatstick is always going to be in play, right? And then it's going to make treasures over and over and over again, and it's going to continue to feed us for the length of the game. So I think Mearsmith is kind of like that. It's just another one of those cards. But these are blockers; they're attackers.
Yeah. And two more decks that I thought of that this is good in, especially given some of the other downshifts we had. Ellis Ilkor
Yep. Oh
loves
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Ellis Ilkor playing any of its artifact ramp can then use this to create a body that can be sacked to a witch's cauldron to drain everybody for one, draw a card, gain 2 life.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's pretty good. The other one is probably, I don't know if this is as good for this one, but Raph, Weatherlight Stalwart,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
is wanting to create a lot of. I actually at my local LGS, I have someone who plays that deck quite a bit and is using Vacation Crier, I believe it is, to discard cards to make tokens. No, the other Raph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the
Um,
Weatherlight Stalwart. Yeah. There we
Yep.
go.
We also
Yep.
have to have some just like dirtily tokens in play that can help with the card draw engine. And one of the things that's tough with the deck is that you want to do some artifact ramp so that you can do that second ability. Many times that's the win con. So to be able to play artifacts and then have a payoff for it. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing here with these common cards. We're seeing you're doing your game plan and you're getting payoffs for it while you do it. It's not just advancing the game plan, it's like giving you an extra push as well, which is really nice.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got Diego says, I just wanted to mention that I'm going to slam this in my LSL core deck. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it seems perfectly reasonable. An engine that makes lots of bodies. Yeah. In a deck that probably does some amount of ramping is good. Yeah, for sure. I think the other home for it that seems particularly disgusting is Sludge Strider. And I just mentioned this a moment ago, but I wanted to bring it up on screen so that people could see it. Sludge Strider is our Esper artifact combo deck
Ooh.
yeah, I mean, you make a lot of mana and you can make a lot of triggers and ETB and LTB. This is great, having a card that can basically feed into our ability while also protecting us on the ground with some blockers just seems phenomenal. So, yeah, definitely a lot to be said about this card. It seems perfectly reasonable. I'm excited to see what people do with it. Let's move on to the next one. We've got Spectral Grasp. This card was not on my list at first until I reread it, and then I reread it again. And it's like, oh, this is an impetus card because they can't attack you and they can't block you. Well, that means that they're going to attack everyone else. And boy, that just really turns my crank. Cards like this represent massive resource disparity. They're wildly efficient because what happens is you put this on somebody's creature and everybody at the table realizes, wow, this is now coming at me for the rest of the game. And so they may actually choose to then destroy that creature. So not only did your spell read, you no longer have a creature as it relates to me, and you're going to send your attention elsewhere, but everybody else then has to respond to that thing because it's coming at them, which means that if you got their creature and then somebody else uses a kill spell on it, then you got 2 cards for 1. And I think that that's phenomenal, especially for aggressive or mid-range decks. The fact that this is also basically making them do damage to other people is just, it's quite good. It's quite good.
So we have a variety of these effects in white. I mean, pacifism is kind of like the classic one, right? And that one is, and it's the most basic, and it's at that mana cost. And it was good, but then WotC in the last year just decided to say, what the heck, let's give you better stuff. And so now we have things like you're showing on the screen, Planar Disruption and Realmbreaker's Grasp. So not only do we get pacifism, but we also get detainment. So activated abilities can't be activated. So those are key. I throw those into decks for things like Gretchen, for Weavers, for all kinds of stuff. And so those are relevant abilities. That being said, this one is particularly good because I find when you play those effects, if you're playing them as a pacifism to stop a creature coming at you, you've kind of also now eliminated a player as a threat. So let's say you put like a pacifism on Dargo.
Yeah.
Well, Dargo is just sad, and now Dargo isn't doing anything unless we
very
can sack
sad.
him.
Yeah.
Right. You play this, and it basically reads, I don't have to worry about Dargo, but you guys do.
But you do. But you do. Yeah, so in fact, its closest comparison is going to be Martial Impetus, right? Which is different and in some ways more devastating. But the funny thing about Martial Impetus is that there are situations where you get into the 1v1 with this player, and now they have this thing that's helping them kill you. Whereas whereas this card here is going to retain its value as it relates to the 1v1 until the end of the game.
Yep, helps the whole game. At 2 mana, it's a great rate. And the other thing too is again, this is we're talking about how WotC is kind of helping with White's color identity. One of the things White does well is set rules. So giving us rule setting abilities like this is really good at a very low rarity. Like a pacifism is the most obvious rule setting. You can't attack and you can't block with this thing. So I'm just turning it off. But here we get the same effect, but it isn't as devastating to the player. It keeps them in the game. It's the kind of that secondary consequence sort of thing. You don't want to turn somebody off so hard that they're no longer a threat, because then the other 2 players may be looking at you as the threat. Or if somebody else at the table is a bigger threat, well, now you've just turned off one player from being able to address that threat. So I think that this card is going to be a lot better than it might initially read. Again, it's giving us another enchantment in white, which is great. That's going to help with all the glitters. If you're already playing Ethereal Armor, it'll help with that as well. I will be putting this in Norica Yamazaki, which I play as a casual deck. Norica just seems to keep getting better over time, and if they keep printing more and more effects like this, I may eventually try it competitively. But yeah, this is a fantastic one.
Here, we're coming back. We're coming back. Okay. So this is also tutorable. That's the other thing we want to keep in mind. I think everything you said there, absolutely true. And it's for a great price, right? This is like we keep getting better and better pacifisms, and I think that's a positive signal for white. So yeah, definitely exciting. Um, let's move on to the next one here. We've got supply runners, the other best doggo, the other gooder boy. This card has me really excited. This is
Yeah.
super strong. 5 mana for a 2/2 that's going to anthem your whole team permanently. Um,
Yes.
this card, the first thought I had was Shadowfax. It's so good in that deck. It's
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
if Supply Runners comes down after you did Soul of Migration, God help the table because
Yeah.
dark things are going to start happening. Like
Yes.
this not only feeds the Shadowfax by making it bigger, but it's taking everything else and increasing the size, and it can be cheated into play. Um, there's other homes for it as well. It could be the very, very top end, for example, of a Conclave Mentor deck where you put a +1/+1 counter on everything, and then it becomes two of them, which is really, really gross. The closest we had to this effect before was Relief Captain, which is a 4 mana 3/2 with support 3 that can put +1/+1 counters on different things. Um, Supply Runners is 1 mana more. It's slightly smaller. It can't buff itself, but it does everything. And boy, that seems so good when white is exceptionally good at producing lots of cheap, evasive bodies. Battle Screech, Soul of Migration, all of your sort of Battlefield Raptor, Healer's Hawk, Acacia. This is great. I love this card. Where do you see this going? And I'm also going to step away for a second. So let us know where
Yeah.
you think this is going.
I have a lot to say about this one. So this one is very impactful for a few reasons. The first one is going back to what I was saying about Drown in Sorrow. So I'm looking more at toughness buffs now to deal with sweepers in the format because they're going to be more flexible to deal with the -2/-2 type effects and also things like Fiery Cannonade and Breath Weapon. So one of the advantages of this is right now in white, if we want to put counters on the whole board at common, the kinds of effects that we have are Inspiring Roar, which puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. We have Silver Flame Ritual, which does the same thing, and we have Now for Wrath, Now for Ruin. Silver Flame and Now for Wrath, Now for Ruin have the additional bonus of also giving your board vigilance. So those are all effects that are at 4 mana. So if you're looking at this at five and thinking, 5 mana for a 2/2, I do think that this is a much stronger card than it may seem. Because it's going to pump your whole board, and
Yeah.
because what white wants to do is build that very wide board. So you're probably, I would say, going to build a board that is going to be +5 toughness, +6, not toughness, excuse me, power, +5 power, +6 power.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot of creatures on board. This is going to be a later game payoff that
Late
is
game
very,
bomb.
yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is this is flickerable, so you can recur for value. I can't do that with a Soul Flame Ritual. I can't do it with an Alpha Wrath.
Nope. And you can't hit this off of Militia Bugler.
Nope.
You can hit this with Militia Bugler.
You
You
can.
can
You
hit
can.
this with Airlift Captain. You cannot
Yes.
hit Silver Flame Ritual with any of those things. Right? The fact that
Right.
it's attached to a body is enormously important. And I hadn't thought about the fact that it was flickerable for Shadowfax, which plays all of the flickers.
Yes. Airlift Chaplain can't get it because it's mana value, not power.
Mm.
So that is one struggle. But the I think the flickerability, also being able to find it with a Militia Bugler, and I think those are going to be things to its benefit. The other effects we have right now for pumping the board are typically like temporary buffs with activated abilities or ETBs.
Yep.
So this is really the first one on a body that you can flicker. That's going to buff the whole board. So it's actually introducing, in a way, a new effect. So I actually think this one is very impactful. I know it probably doesn't read that way at first, but it's
5
pretty
mana
good.
2/2 that buffs your table. This is a top end card. You don't want to see this really in your opening hand, but the beauty of it is that most cards aren't in your opening hand, and that's okay. So this card is going to be great. I really do think this is going to have a ton of homes. It's going to be in GDP. It's going to be in Mentor of the Meek. It's going to go in any deck that wants to go wide. I mean, it could go potentially in a gut deck as a way to raise the toughness to a point where gut doesn't die to the -2/-2 so that you don't lose the +2/+2 from the Inspiring Leader.
Correct.
It is
going to go
expensive, but you know,
Sensor.
Mhm.
Phyrexian Sensor will definitely play this one because so many of the creatures that I play in that deck, they are 1 or 2 toughness. So being able to buff that a little bit is going to help me out a lot. Yeah, this is a very impactful card.
Yeah, the new best boy, for sure.
Yeah.
Or boys, or girls. Yeah, we don't know. It's a goodest dog. We're gonna move on to the next two here. These two are gonna be honorable mentions. They're still good cards, but I think that in terms of like their broad playability, they maybe aren't as broadly playable. So moving on to the next one here, we have Ministrant of Obligation. I'm actually really bullish on this card, but I don't think it's as widely. It might be as widely playable as the other two, but the fact that this has Afterlife 2 is pretty big. This is 3 bodies on 1 card, and the 2 bodies that you get are better than the first body that you make. And decks that like to, let's step back just a little bit. A creature where its first body is better than its second feels bad to sacrifice because you're downgrading your creature. What I like about this is that we are upgrading our creature. We are taking our 2/1 and we're making it into 2 1/1 flyers. They're also black. That is something to mention. So if we suit one of these things up with an all that glitters, they're not going to be able to Doomblade it. They're not going to be able to snuff it out. So this is great. And I really love, too, that this signals that we might get more Afterlife because I really like Afterlife as a mechanic. I think that the evasion on these creatures is really, really good. And think about this in Mentor of the Meek. Whew. Oh.
Should be very good in Mentor. Yeah.
I mean...
This is very good in that. It's good in any mono white deck that cares about just a creature ETB.
Yep.
And the other thing to keep in mind is that there's some relevant creature types here. So Cleric is very relevant. And there's a lot of Cleric synergies in white.
What is it called?
Spirit,
Daru something?
Daru Spiritualist, yep.
Yep, Daru Spiritualist is, well... No. It's not Daru Spiritualist. We're looking for the one that, let's see. O, prevent, O, damage, O, cleric, rarity, common, color equals white. It is...
Oh, yes. Yeah,
that one. Well, there's this one, but then where's the one that's, that prevents something from attacking?
You're thinking Whipgrass Entangler.
Whipgrass, yep, here we go. Yeah, here's another one that has a similarly important card. I thought you might like seeing this brought up.
Yeah, this is a good one. This one is great. So this lets you pay into that tax to basically put a pacifism for temporarily on the creature, or tax your opponent. Either one is relevant. And so it gives you that. Spirit, there's some minor spirit synergies, probably not as important. The fact that they fly is super good, so they're just coming into the battlefield with evasion. The fact that they're tokens is important. So I think that the deck that really likes this is probably Gut, because Gut can easily sack the Ministrant and then get 2 tokens, and the tokens become 3/3s.
Wow.
So again, Gut's eating good.
Broken.
I think any kind of Orzhov aristocrat strategy likes this one. And
Yep,
so, we might see it show up there again.
like
LSL
Denethor.
core. Yep, Denethor, LSL core. This is a very strong downshift. I'm very excited for this one.
Yeah, for sure. And so maybe it's not entirely belonging in honorable mentions. I think it still has a lot of good homes, but I did limit the category to 5, so it's somewhat arbitrary. It's still a good card. Diego says this could even work in 60 card Orzhov Ephemerate builds. Oh yeah,
Sure.
for the retriever, um, for the
Mm.
dogs. Yeah. Um, okay, great. Moving on to the next one, and this one's on the list because of me. Um, I I don't know, Brownie. Would you have put this on your list?
It's good.
Yeah,
It's
less
gonna
less
be
so.
tough to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough
So
to play.
so this card, the reason I put it on here was yeah, Diego. Yeah, I got that. I know you meant the dogs for sure. I was just circling back to your comment, make sure I addressed it. Um, Sunblade Angel. There's a few things that are problematic here. It's a 3/3 and it's 6 mana. But
Yep.
holy keywords, Batman. This is like a bad Baneslayer Angel.
Mhm.
In that it's if you suit this up with anything, this is a win condition in white. And white does want in some ways for individual cards that can do that. It's evasive, it's going to win combat, it blocks and it gains life. So you put a bone splitter on this and you're good to go. So does every deck pardon me, does every deck want this? No. Um, are there certain decks that are going to want this? I think so. Um,
Mhm.
because
Shadow
it's like
Text?
I mean you put a great sort of tier on this, you put a bone splitter, you put all the glitters. I think it's kind of sick. Not phenomenal, but I think it's very playable.
Yeah,
Shadowfax.
this is a Shadowfax card.
Oh, yeah, it
Definitely.
sure is. Yeah,
I think
I
this is a
love that.
Shadowfax.
Wow.
We have some commanders in. I don't think they're very competitive. We have some commanders that care about angels and flyers and things like that. That would maybe like a card like this. I think that the 6 mana for a 3/3 is going to be tough. And I hate using the dies to removal argument, but now, I mean, our
But
format
it
now is
does.
gonna. I mean, it'll die to a bolt. If somebody's in late game and they're holding the bolt, they'll bolt this.
Yep.
Um, Sulfurous Blast is now a thing in our format, and this will die to Sulfurous Blast.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one. Not that it's bad, it's just that level of mana investment. The 6 mana is a
Yep.
lot. It's asking a lot. If you can cheat this into play, go
That's
for it.
great. The dies to
But yeah,
removal thing is overused because it's used
right.
for things that where that comparison and that analysis isn't that relevant because yeah, if your 1 mana creature dies to bolt, so does every other 1 mana creature. Like, oh sure, you spent 1 mana for your 1/1. Yeah,
I
Delver dies
spent
to
one
bolt.
mana to Yeah,
So
I've spent 1 mana to duress your lightning bolt from your hand. I think
yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine, right? Like, and if somebody says, "Oh, Delver, it dies to bolt," it's like, well, yeah, right. This is different. It saying it dies to bolt, kind of a different story, right? Because it's expensive,
It's
um,
expensive.
and that's a big disparity in terms of resources invested. And so I think that for a deck like Shadowfax, probably great. There's probably some sort of mid-rangey or maybe even controlling white deck that could play this. You could maybe you could even play this in Satyr Enchanter, and then you
Mhm.
just throw Ancestral Mask on it or some other big pump, and you've got a monster, right? You've got another or a Narlid, basically.
Yep.
Except that instead of getting huge, it gets keywords, and you make it huge with other things. So I
Correct.
did want to mention this as part of our kind of the story here of the white cards that were downshifted because I do think that there are places and homes for this, and I don't want to leave that out. So, all right, we are now moving in to our commanders. Okay. And these are in no particular order. None of these are in any particular order. So don't think I'm listing these in order of power or of worthiness for your deck. The first one we have is Anafenza Kin Tree Spirit. This one is kind of like a good, what's it called? Good luck unicorn, or no, good fortune unicorn. Good fortune unicorn. But it is non-token, and it is bolster instead of just any +1/+1 counter, right? But the +1/+1 counter can be put on other things. So, and it's mono white. I don't know that this one will see much play. I don't know that I find this very exciting because Conclave Mentor does so much more than this, right? Conclave Mentor does ask you to play creatures with +1/+1 counters on them. But Conclave Mentor is in green and in white, which gives you enormous redundancy of that effect. I mean, you get so many cheap, one cost creatures that come in with a +1/+1 counter on it, and they immediately become a 2/2, and then they become a 3/3 when you proliferate, or a 4/4 or something. And it doesn't care whether they're tokens or not. So for the same cost, and it also gains life when it dies. So what do you think about this one? Is there something I'm missing here about Anafenza that appeals to you?
No, this one. So as spoilers were slowly coming out, this was one of the first ones that came out, and I was initially very high on it. There was some talk in our server for a bit about, is this a combo deck? I don't think it is. But
not in mono white.
No, because I don't think there's a really good payoff. And so I think what we're looking at here is a very good, like a really awesome white weenie commander. But I think that it's a white weenie commander for casual.
Yep.
I think casual. I built a casual deck for this. It's 68 creatures and 32 lands.
Awesome.
So, and what one of the cool things White Weenie can do is, with its ETBs and activated abilities, it can do all of the interaction with the creatures. So the idea is that it interacts with whatever the creatures are doing. So I have like Alabaster Host Interceptor as an O-ring. I have things that ETB and Disenchant.
Unicorn.
Tapping on effects. So you can do that evasion, things that have activated abilities for protection and for buffs and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to be as good in competitive. Unfortunately, as much as cool as Anafenza is, I'm seeing in the chat, Thunderous said to us, if I want to spend 6 mana, I want it to help me kill a player at least. Eagles of the North is a new 6-drop flyer that does this better, I think.
Yeah. My response to that, Thunderous, is that you're right, but Eagles of the North is free. And the reason it's free is because Eagles of the North, when I play those 1-mana cyclers, I cut a land. So we're not talking about a slot that is going to be one thing or the other. It's always going to be Eagles of the North, because Eagles of the North is a land. It's an Ash Barrens, right? And it's also a card that we can just cast. It's a card that we can cycle into the graveyard to reanimate. Eagles of the North is great. Eagles of the North, though, is not the same card, right? This angel has a lot of keywords on it. It's very hard to fight through a vigilant, life-linking, first striking, flying, big beater. And we're going to make it big, right? Any deck that plays that is going to have ways to make it big. I think that's the only time you would want to play it. So while I think you're right, the Eagles of the North is actually in some ways, and you're not saying this, but I'll say it, I think Eagles of the North is a better card, because Eagles of the North is free to play in your deck. You just cut a land and you just get that card. You just get this card in your deck. And it's got an Anthem, and it's giving you, first strike. There's a lot to like about Eagles of the North. But I do think that they're kind of apples and oranges because they don't occupy the same deck slot. Like, you have to allocate a slot to the Angel. You don't really have to allocate a slot to the Eagles. It just comes along for the ride. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Anything you wanted to say about that, Brownie, in response to that?
No, I think Eagles is better. So I'm not as high on Sunblade Angel. I think it's good if you can cheat it into play. So it's Shadowfax, sure. That's kind of what I look at it.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so on to the next one. We've got Kemba. This was like one of the first cards that we got downshift spoiler for. This card can do some pretty degenerate stuff.
Yes.
It's inexpensive. It's a cleric. It
Yep.
is a legend, which is good because means it doesn't die to cast down. Um, it makes a shitload of bodies doing something that white already kind of does really well, which is like equipment.
Yep.
Um, it's also a 2/4. I am so pleased that this is a 2/4 and not like
Yes.
a high power, low toughness thing because the
Yes.
equipment's going to make it huge. So, talk to me about Kemba. You've posted pictures of some pretty degenerate starts with this. You're probably using cards like Bone Saw, Leather Armor, your Spider Silk Net, stuff like that, right? Or maybe you don't. Maybe it's like Short Swords, which are actually cheaper because the 1 mana to cast, 1 mana to equip. I love Short Swords. So, how many
Yes.
Short Swords do you play in this deck?
You want to play a lot of them. So I had so my feeling on the deck is this. So it is this is going to sound like a criticism, but it's also going to kind of be, I think, a feather in its hat. It is a slow gut. I think that this is slower than gut, but I
Yep.
think it does some things that are interesting that make it different from gut. And I also think that and this part is definitely something that I was talking with Gator about because of the similarity to gut, because of that just like passive token generation and that kind of way it can snowball. Gator's take was, and I agree with him, that this is probably better in a meta where the sweepers are getting better, because this won't die as easy. That 4 toughness really does matter. There's been a lot of different ways that this is, as you said, this was one of the first one previewed, so we've already had some play testing with this happen in the servers. Um, and I've already lost to this once.
Really?
Yes, and I was playing a player in our servers, Yami, and Yami had the deck, and I think it performed very well. Looked very similar to what I kind of thought the concept of the deck
Yeah.
was, and really, I think what you're doing here is it almost doesn't even matter what equipment you're playing. It
Yeah.
just needs to be cheap.
Right. Just needs
You
to be
want a
cheap.
lot, yep, you want a lot of cheap equipment, because let's face it, the equipment that we have at Common just isn't great. Like we don't have swords of X and Y and things like that are going to be doing these very intense things.
Yeah,
So
you don't have
we're
Shadow
getting,
Spear, like
I mean, the things that we're going to do, and when we do get really good effects, like get a bunch of keywords, the equip cost is kind of high. And with a deck like this, you want Kemba to come down and get a couple of equipments pretty fast.
yep.
So you don't want to have to pay a ton of equip costs on top of casting Kemba. So I think that what this deck does that's different from Gut, it's slower. It's going to take a little bit longer for the effect to snowball because these are 2/2s, they're not 4/1s.
Yep.
But what this can do is hold up Kemba basically as a blocker, and
Yep.
then swing one way at a player with a bunch of tokens, and you don't care what happens. Like they can die, but you're going to put some damage on them because next turn you're just gonna, or actually just at your upkeep, you've just made 3 or 4 more, so they're replacing themselves every turn. And that's really nice. And then if you're continuing to put more and more equipment on Kemba, you're going to snowball even more. You're going to be making more of those tokens every
Yeah.
turn.
I'm not even
Um,
sure. I'm not even sure this is really that this compares well to Gut at all. Now that I think about it, because Gut, it comes down and it immediately produces a body that attacks. In
yeah,
this case here, you play Kemba. If it's on 3, which would be the same timing as a Gut, maybe you ramp into it with a rock, and you play it on 3. You equip it with a. There's actually very few ways to play and equip this on turn 3. So it's like turn
yeah,
4, you spend all of turn 4 protecting and equipping it, and it's at turn 5 that you actually start making 2/2s, but they don't have haste, and they're only
right.
2/2s. So this is like a mid-range deck, right? This is whereas Gut is very clearly aggro
Yeah,
in
a
most
very
cases, or at
strong
least
start.
proactive.
Yeah, a very strong start with Kemba would look like a turn 1 leather armor into
Yep.
a turn 2 rock, which will cast you, yeah, some kind of 1 drop equipment. And then turn 3 with 4
Kemba with
mana, you
protection.
Kemba. put the ward 1 on for free and then equip something else, you're making 2 tokens on 4. So then that's a good start for Kemba. The also just being able to put 1 on and then hold up protection is another thing. So I think that build, I'm willing to see other ones and see what they do. I think that one probably is going to be the most effective, where you're just playing the cheap equipments and just trying to maximize the number of tokens that you're making, holding up Kemba as a blocker. In as like a plan like C or D, being able to Voltron Kemba towards somebody, but like that's not your main plan. I have seen some decks that are trying to make this Voltron. I don't know that works out as well, because I think this just ends up getting removed pretty quickly.
Yeah, it just dies. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I also think that the other builds that I have seen have tried to play more into resiliency. So what I mean by that is like assuming that Kemba is going to get removed, and so let's play creatures that want to wear equipment that have either evasion or that are cheating equipment costs or that get additional buffs because they have equipment. I understand the thinking with those. The problem is that to do that, you're playing a lot of creatures that if they're not wearing the equipments, like if you're putting them on Kemba, you basically just have a bunch of vanillas. So it's not as good. It's really there as you're basically assuming that your primary plan is going to fall apart. And I would rather just say the plan to do with the deck is the best plan.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that, yeah, I don't want to like default to my plan B. So you're looking really, for like really cheap, very like Core Halberd that you have up on the screen there is a great one. That's going to be like all-star in a deck like this. I think cheap equipments that give you some relevant keywords, but that also are going to just be making a lot of those tokens. I think that's probably where Kemba's really going to shine.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting commander. Certainly does something powerful, and I expect that we'll see some small number of people playing Kemba and trying it out. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with it. It's a shame we don't get another color, because having access to like Distant Melody or Keep Watch or something like that to draw cards would be great. And I worry that while the ability is a form of resource advantage, right? You're getting something for it. You're just not getting cards, right?
Right.
That we are going to run out of cards in this deck, and we're not going to have a ton of fuel to be able to hold up our resources while we're developing. So it's kind of a mid-range deck that's not going to be terribly interactive. It's like it's a snowball deck is what it is. You're like snowballing on turn 5, you're going to start to snowball.
Right.
And in some ways, because it's kind of slow, that may grant you some leeway where people may not interrupt you. They may forget that you're there because you're not really doing anything just at first, and you may steal wins with that, while also just having a lot of bodies. So definitely a cool card. Next one, we've got Lashiel Clockwork Scholar. This is a 3-mana 2/4, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt by attacking artifact creatures you control. Whenever one or more artifact creatures enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Oh, the once each turn. How tragic. So they kneecap the card, but is it still good?
Yes, I think it's still good. I don't think it's good for cPDH. While the preventing damage is cool, White already does a ton of things that are going to either evade or be able to keep its creatures in play, and so what you're having to do is play artifact creatures that are not as good. Now, granted, they do at least one of them every turn is going to draw you a card, so you're going to be able to keep filling up your hand. There are you could flicker a creature to draw a card on somebody else's turn, but you're spending a card.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like scroll shift to draw 2 cards kind of thing.
Yeah, stuff like that. But I think that this is really cool for casual. Like if I ever end up in the PDH Pal studio, I want to play this card because it's an elephant and it looks like it would be fun aggro.
You hear that sniff? You got to get this guy in there. Everybody play elephants.
That's right. But I think that the artifact creature quality that we have right now, as an aggro strategy, is not going to pay off as well. I think it does cool things, don't get me wrong, but I think for competitive, It's not enough. I
Yeah,
do like that it's a 2/4 on 3. That's cool. I like that it draws cards. Like, it's got awesome abilities. I just don't know that it's going to be enough for cPDH.
totally agree. So we're gonna move on. The next one, we've landed. The eagle has landed. Um, Teshar. Sheesh. This card
Yeah.
is notoriously combo oriented. Um,
Yes.
I admittedly have not done anything with Teshar. I don't. People may be surprised by this, but I don't play, nor have I played much at all of EDH. I was a Pauper player who became a Pauper Commander player, who then evolved
Mm.
into the competitive space because all the cards that I couldn't play in Pauper, I could play in PDH or in cPDH.
Mhm.
So tell me about Teshar. I am an open book. I am but a babe. Educate me about Teshar, and then tell me about what you plan to do with this in cPDH. Because this one, I think a lot of people are really excited about it. I read Puzzle Box's primer on this that he posted recently that he had been working with some people on. So yeah, tell me about it.
Yep. So this got previewed, and so first of all, I want to say I called it. I've been talking about this downshift for about 3 months. Again, getting back to WotC design for white, artifact recursion is a big deal, and I know that this doesn't read artifact recursion, but that's what it is. And I think WotC knows that. You're playing a historic spell, you're recurring a creature, so this wants to play good, like solid creatures, but it also wants to play a lot of artifact creatures. And unlike Lochiel, who wants to do aggro with those artifact creatures, this wants to use those creatures to progress you to a win with combo. So this is a really big deal that we have this in the format. I'm like, some people have said this, and I'm tempted to agree with them that they're like, does WotC know about Pauper Commander now? Because this is a pretty big downshift. Um, the,
I think that
the
they do.
yeah,
I mean, not to like put my tinfoil hat on, but I think that WotC is more in touch and more in the loop than people give them credit for. I think a
mm,
lot of people tend to toe this line that WotC is like incompetent, that they don't test their cards, that they don't do the research, that they don't know what their community wants, they don't know what their community plays. I don't think that's true at all. WotC is a big company that makes a lot of money and has a lot of employees. So, um, to say that they don't know about Pauper Commander or that they don't design things for it is probably fallacious. Um, and I think that,
Light
uh,
is saying in the chat, mention that we harass them
yeah,
relentlessly.
we do. I mean, the Pauper Commander community is very active, very vocal. Um, Sometimes we get a little hate for it, but I think that the people that are upset by that are probably just perceiving that we're proselytizing when in fact people are just trying to expand awareness around it. But regardless, so I think it's
Let me,
quite possible that Teshar was designed for Pauper Commander in a sense, just like all of the uncommon legendaries that we got in Baldur's Gate and in Pauper Commander the original um, uh, oh my god, my brain is falling apart.
Commander.
Commander Legends, yeah, that was on the tip of my tongue. Yeah, so they just have to know, right?
Yeah, I mean, and one of the reasons why is because so I don't need mono white to do everything, but apparently WotC does. So I have said that in cPDH, the one thing that mono white has been missing as an archetype is combo. We have
Yep.
aggro deck, so we like Hammers of Moradin is an aggro deck. Illuminator Virtuoso is an
Yep.
aggro deck.
Yep.
We have mid range. We have GDP, Bastion Protector. If you haven't played it yet, it's that's been emerging as one of the mid range decks. And
Mid
then
range.
yes, and GDP especially is definitely one that has performed pretty well. Then we have stacks. That's the other thing that white can do, and we have that with Phyrexian Sensor. Control if you prefer. So really, the only one that we don't have is combo. There have been some attempts to do combo with mono white.
Yeah.
Magnanimous Magistrate is one of them. We have Leon and Relic Warder,
Yep.
which can kind of do combo things, but there's no good payoff for it. So it's just not enough.
Yeah.
Um, this one, on the other hand, is a very
This
strong combo deck. And the reason I wanted it so bad for our format is that in cEDH, a preponderance of the combo lines are already using commons. It's already almost a pauper EDH
yeah,
deck.
just without the commander.
There, yeah, there are some very powerful effects that they have access to that we do not. Some very powerful tutors. Clark Clan Ironworks is like a good card in that deck.
A good card? Is it a good card?
It's a very
I
good card in that deck.
survived Modern when KCI
Right.
was around, and I am so pleased that I've never had to play against that card ever again.
Exactly. That being said, we can rebuild it in the aggregate.
Yep.
We have cards that basically do Card Clan Ironworks if you're able to get them into play. The nice thing is that you probably are able to get those into play because Teshar is going to be drawing you a ton of cards. The whole game plan is you want to mill, you want to draw, you want to drop a bunch of eggs, drop artifact creatures, and then your win condition is some kind of retriever, some sack outlet, and some kind of Ashnods, is a great one, some kind of payoff. Because then you can just recur. So you're going to draw your deck until you get to a win condition. You're going to mill your opponents out with a Ghoul Caller's Bell that you're bouncing back and forth. So this is a very, very cool combo deck for mono white. Having said that, there are some downsides to it. And I will say that even though I'm very enthusiastic about it and I started building it right away, I was on a voice call with Puzzlebox like a couple hours after it was spoiled. I do think Puzzle has kind of figured it out a lot better and a lot more intuitively than I have based on his experience with combo decks. As enthusiastic as I am about mono white, I'm not typically very much a combo player. So the sequencing and things like that, he's much better at, and also knowing how to protect your win and how to approach it as a pilot. It's a cultivated skill.
Yep.
He's really put one together that I think is very strong. Jonathan, who's also a mod in the Common Connoisseurs, has also put together a deck.
Yeah.
They both have very good strengths. Some things that I would do that I'm like, yes, this is fantastic. Some things I would do differently. So I don't really have a list for this one because I'm kind of deferring to them. And what I'm going to do is eventually make my own list that I feel comfortable playing with my play styles. But Puzzle has a very thorough primer, listed out a lot of the different play lines. It's definitely worth reading and checking out. It's an insanely complicated deck. It's one of those decks where you're going to play it and you're going to be like, do I have win? Like, I've goldfished it a ton of times and been like, I'm not sure if I have win here. I think I have win, only to find out I have win like 3 different ways. So it's a weird one. It also, one of the weaknesses of it is that it's not super consistent because we don't have the tutors. Like, we don't have transmute. The kind of tutors that we aren't going to tutor for artifacts. So it's not going to be as consistent as some of the other combo decks. This is definitely a combo deck. Some of the early builds of it were trying to turbo as quickly as possible, and I think that wasn't going to work. So Puzzle has kind of slowed it down, made it a little bit more interactive, made it a little bit more resilient. But it's still doing essentially the Teshar plan, which is play either cost reduced or 0 or 1 mana artifacts, be sacking things to Ashnods, recurring and bouncing those artifacts into a payoff. It's a fun deck. It gives mono white an archetype it hasn't had, which is combo. Do I think this is going to be the strongest combo deck in the format? No.
Hell no.
We're going to have better. But it's definitely a very cool start for mono white having a combo identity in our format. And
would you say it's fair to say this is that this is a thought experiment more than it is a real deck?
No, I think it's a real deck. I do think I think that it will be hard to give this to a new player or a new player to cPDH. I think you could give it to a Teshar player from cEDH and they would pick it up like that. So if I actually put this in, there's a mono white cEDH Discord server, and I put that, hey, this was downshifted, it's PDH legal. and some of the folks over there started making their own lists. They were like, sweet, uh, because we can play our Teshar over in
Yeah.
PD.
I mean,
Um,
I'm seeing
um,
five protection spells here.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so like any counter spell, any removal spell is likely to work. Um, the
go
way
up, go
you,
up, go up, go to the creatures.
so you have
Where are the creatures?
where are the creatures at here? Where?
Is he not even benevolent bodyguard anymore? Oh, puzzle.
No, it's in here. It's in here.
Oh, is it
No, so
so that's
these
the
are the
thing.
ones: one, two, three,
Okay.
four, five, and then and then we also have like I guess no, I mean that's it. So it's just five. So
The recurability of the benevolent bodyguard is really the key
right,
there.
right. So you
Um,
can recur it. You can recur Kami of False Hope. It's not that this folds to a stiff breeze, but it kind
right.
of does sometimes. There's going to be moments where a single piece of interaction, like a counter spell, is going to be so backbreaking. And this isn't to discount it because I'm really glad that this was made. It's really cool that this commander is available to us, but it's going to be, for one thing, advanced users only. And like I think you said at the beginning, it's not going to be consistent. And to me, inconsistent decks, that's not a tournament winning deck. There's inconsistent decks out there that like in a sense, this strikes me as a little bit similar to like Dargo, Kesket, right? Like the Desket decks, where yeah, you do have like these super explosive combo wins, right? But there's a lot that needs to go right and a lot that can't go wrong to make it work. So it wouldn't be the deck I would pick up, and I understand that there are people who will be really have a strong affinity for a deck like this that's in a very unusual color pie. The advantage you do get is that nobody knows what the fuck you're doing. They know that it
Well,
involves like Workshop Assistant and Mirror Retriever and Ashnod's Altar, but like beyond that, do they really know how you win? Probably
no,
not.
and the other thing is that's one of the advantages. Even though it's not consistent, like almost every card in the deck combos. So that's what makes it different. It's just, did you assemble the right line?
Enormous redundancy built around its engine pieces. The trouble
You
is that
you
it only has so many of them, right? Like you only have one Ashnod's Altar and no way to find it. Um,
Nods is like the most efficient line, but there's other things that like, so for
yeah, let's
example,
take a look at the other ones.
Draw Scorpion is a very good one, because what Draw Scorpion is going to do is it's going to turn something into an Ashnods if you have something that can just sack an artifact. So like if you have a Rusted Slasher, let's say, and it can just sack an artifact to regenerate Rusted Slasher, and you have a Draw Scorpion and a Mana Rock, like you can use that to go mana positive because you can untap the Mana Rock. So that is one line that can work where you're essentially making something an Ashnod's Altar in the aggregate.
Right.
But that's what makes the deck tricky, is knowing, do I have it yet, or is there another piece that I need? And I think it's the kind of thing, as I pilot it, and I think as other people pilot it, we're gonna get a sense of like what works best. I have it right here. Like this is my Teshar stack. I haven't even put lands in yet. I think this is like 80 cards.
Hell yeah.
And I've already and like this is my like, I'll pull it over here. This was like what I cut. Like there's tons of cards that work well. It's just figuring out which ones work best. And that was one of the things Puzzle and I were saying. Like Puzzle and I were talking about it, and I was like, "Is this good?" And he was like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "I don't know either."
Yeah.
Like it's good to know because it's such a different deck for this format.
Yeah,
But
it's exciting that we have it.
Yeah, I think talking with folks who play Teshar and cEDH, really the key here is playing artifact creatures that can sack themselves, and that can be recurred and that draw you into a win is really the thing. We started out with like just a ton of eggs, and there's still eggs in the deck, but eggs are not necessarily the most powerful part of it. I do think if you really want to play mono white, this is the way you go. And I think we're actually going to get some new players as a result of that.
Oh, for sure.
But because it's such a popular cEDH deck. But I don't think it's
cEDH.
So in cEDH, it's still doing Ashnod's lines and Glinthawk lines. But it also has Clark Clan Ironworks, and then it just has a lot of ways to loop things faster. it can still have that win out of nowhere feel. But like I went into the mono white server and they have a spreadsheet of like all of the cards that you could put into Teshar. And I was just looking and grabbing all
Wow.
the commons because they
Oh
have
my
tons of
god.
commons. Like Spring Draw Trap is a win condition in this deck and like nowhere else. Because if you could figure out a way to loop the Spring Draw Trap with something that recurs an artifact, like you win. So once you go infinite, you've won.
So in some ways, many of the things that make Abdel quite good, where everything that you play is playing towards its eventual victory.
Yes.
This is
Yeah, that's a
somewhat
good comparison.
similar. Um,
Yeah.
it's an apt comparison, and it'll be really interesting to see what people do with this one. So if you're interested, chat, in looking at this list here, I am going to drop a link here to Puzzle Box's list. So go take a look at that there, and to his primer. The primer, I believe he mentions in here. Massive thanks to the cEDH community for helping convert this. A chunk of this primer is based on their primers. So there's been a lot
Yeah.
of people working on this particular concept. So I hope I lose to this. I think this is really cool, and it's awesome that Mono White has, a combo line that it didn't have access to before. And it's
Yep.
cool to see certain cards like Cathodian. I really like the Phyrexian Walker and Shield Sphere. Seeing these cards in a deck is just always makes me happy. So definitely a
Absolutely.
cool one. Let's get back here to this and let's see. Do we have anything else? We do. We're going to go into the
Akiri.
multicolored commanders. We've got Akiri, Fearless Voyager. This is a new Boros 3/3 core warrior. Whenever you attack a player with one or more equipped creatures, one or more, very sad, draw a card. And you have the ability to pay one white to unattach it equipment and give it indestructible, tapping it down. Um, Thoughts on this card?
So it's strong card advantage for Boros equipment, in the sense that you could attack, all three of your opponents. Theoretically, you draw three cards. So that's strong. The indestructible is good. And also, having an instant speedway to unattach something is good. Um, I'm I think that this is going to struggle with closing the game, and I think it's also going to struggle with exactly the same things that most Boros equipment decks struggle with, which is the quality of the equipments that are just not super strong. So if you're
Yep.
leaning on, those doing the work for you, you're gonna, I think, feel pretty disappointed. Kemba can play equipments because Kemba doesn't care what the equipments do. It's just
Yep.
going to generate
Yep.
tokens.
Yep.
And then White has a ton of like token payoffs.
Yep.
But this, on the other hand, you're equipping creatures that are probably pretty low to the ground, and then hoping that you're going to draw into some more
Yeah.
gas to win the game. I'm not. I'm not as high on
Yeah.
this one. I think it's good that folks are it's another Boros equipment commander that I think is worth testing, but I think it's going to deal with the same problems that like Roger Arden deal with, and that Cole deals with, and that Rayav deals with, and that all of these Boros. I'm trying to think. Brunor, there's like a
Yep.
ton of them.
Yep. The
They all
two that
deal.
really come to mind are Bruner and Rayav. Um,
Yeah.
Nate Diggity was somebody in our server who worked on Bruner. He submitted a version of it to the cPDH deck database when it was still operational, and I helped take that deck and sort of get it into a place where it was going to be resilient for the cPDH environment. And when I learned about Rayav, I realized, wow, like you could play these pretty bad equipment that are really expensive to utilize in Bruner and be enormously reliant on Bruner to
Yeah.
make them cheap, right? Or you can play Rayav and play cheap creatures and cheap equipment that then make the bad equipment good on a creature that's cheap and more easily defended because it's cheap. And so I really like Rayav. Rayav is a commander I think that is wildly underplayed. It produces enormously explosive starts. It can kill people like on turn 4. Um, and the difference here is that Akiri Fearless Voyager is like the grindy, it's like grindy compared to that. And so I think that there's a lot to be said for the fact that this card draws cards, it protects its threats. It's not awfully expensive, but the 3 mana hurts it. The 3 mana is hard for me to stomach because, like, what is the game plan? What are we equipping? What does it cost? You could see a world where maybe this plays a lot of those cards that say, when it's equipped, it gets XYZ, whatever. Um, but this is like a mid range Boros equipment deck. It's not going to be fast because the equipment isn't big like Great Axe in Bruner, and it's not getting double strike like it does in Rayav. So it's going to be mid range. It's going to be a mid range Boros deck that could potentially draw a ton of cards and apply a lot of resilient, sustained pressure, but it's going to be nowhere near like Rayav level speed. And Rayav can do that while also protecting its stuff pretty damn well because the auras that protect also grant double strike. So, um, so I don't think that Akiri Fearless Voyager is by any means unplayable. I think it does have cPDH chops. I just think that you're going to have to work through some deck building challenges to make it work. You're probably going to need to play some amount of ramp, which is okay because you can draw cards, right? So the ramp doesn't feel so bad if you can draw more cards to get more action. Playing ramp in a deck that doesn't draw cards hurts because then when you top deck that shit later on, it's hard, right? But you could see a game plan where you're drawing 1 card a turn with this from turn 4 onward. You're drawing 2 cards a turn from turn 5 onward, maybe 3 cards a turn from 6 onward. So there's definitely like a game plan I can envision in my mind where we're drawing a lot of cards and we have this cheap ability to protect our stuff. So it
Right.
has a lot of the right text, but it is awkward. It's a little awkward, right? I think equipment. One of the things that does work for it is that equipment is inherently a safer, slower approach to auras. Auras, when your creature with the aura dies, you lose the aura and you get 2 for 1. With equipment, it's like you're playing out this creature that doesn't die, that continually comes back basically for a cheap cost.
Right.
Like a Bone Splitter is a 2 mana 2/2 that costs 1 mana to reanimate in a sense, to like
Sure.
resurrect it back. And so what I like about that is that if we're drawing cards and we're protecting our threats built into the commander, then maybe we have this pathway to a mid-rangey kind of deck where your Bone Splitters and your Short Swords are all modifying your creatures that are maybe like evasive. Like Rayav, for example, one of the things that you do in Rayav is that you play a lot of cheap evasive creatures with some keyword. And then when you put a Bone Splitter on them, they hit for 6. Right? You put a Short Sword on them, they hit for 4. So you get big damage amplification. You're not going to get that amplification in this. So you're going to be more reliant on drawing into more equipment and loading more pieces of equipment onto one thing or lots of different things. So interesting commander. Not exactly certain like where this will go, but I really want to see somebody build this because I think it has potential.
It was after it was spoiled, it was getting played that night. I actually saw a game, Teshar versus Akiri versus Lady of Angela, which is a new deck we're dealing with, and Composite Golem. And
Wow, what a pod.
yeah, and that ended in a draw because Teshar wasn't drawing into WinCon, and Akiri was not able to close the game, and they ran out of time. Same with Lady of Angela. I think Composite Golem got eliminated. But I think that's going to be where this struggles. It wants to be aggressive and it wants to be going at each player. I think it's just going to struggle to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So you might not get the intended card advantage that you want.
How does this compare
all of these
to something like Liara? Right? It's cheaper than Liara. It has the ability to draw 3 cards per turn, and that is contingent on having 3 creatures that are attacking different players. And it is cheaper, and it has built-in protection. It doesn't
Right.
reduce the cost of the things that you exile. Um, but this kind of feels like maybe a better version of Liara. It's a little different because Liara is discounting things pretty dramatically. Like you're casting like a 1 mana Crimson Fleet Commodore, and you're casting like free
Mhm.
Bonders ornaments. You're like ramping when you attack.
Yeah,
Um,
I treat Liara. I would rather play Liara than this because Liara what Liara is doing is card advantage and cost reduction. So you're doing ramp and card advantage
yep.
on the commander, which both feel good. This one it gives you some card advantage and then protection. Brunor is giving you essentially like acceleration, and it's also giving you like some amount of ramp because it will
But
give you some free equips. Um,
but boy,
I
it's 4
just
mana. It's like you run
yeah,
Bruner out there on 4, and somebody just like blows it in half.
e- exactly, and so
And then you
and
don't
you know
play the
and
game. You don't play the game.
so I think that these Boros equipment commanders are interesting. I just don't know if they're enough.
Yeah.
So it's tough. I want it to be good. Like I want Boros to do well. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
right now Boros does well in other like
In the
we
aggressive
mentioned.
sphere.
Yeah, Commander Liara Portier. It does well with Gut Leader. It does well with Amber Veteran.
Yep.
Those are the ones that seem to be having better success.
Yeah, and
Dargo.
even Liara has not had amazing results. Um, I have not played enough of Rayav to put results up with it. I just ended up working on other things. But I have made updates to it that I think I'm pretty confident you can win games with Rayav. Um, just because it's on a similar clock to Gut. Rayav can very quickly produce a kill with commander damage, or while applying a lot of damage to other people too. But again, it's a lot more appealing to me than Akiri. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So Thunderous said, I play Akiri and other Boros equipped commanders in EDH, and Akiri especially needs the equipment to be powerful. It needs your equipment to be powerful to be good. You also need get free equips in EDH. Yeah, yeah. In our
Yeah.
format, you're paying like you could be paying like 3 mana to equip a kind of okay equipment, right? Like Bone Splitter is about as good as it gets, right? Like 1 mana to
Mhm.
cast, 1 mana to equip, start drawing cards. You don't get that in this format, and so I think that does limit its power. Whereas like in Rayav, at least, if you give +2/+0 to something, you're turning it into a 6 power creature, and that's a lot of damage in a format with 30 life points.
Right.
So I think that's kind of where the comparisons are, and why we have to look at it through the lens of Rayav, Bruner, Liara, right? Like, what is this doing that those ones aren't? That said, though, you could draw a lot of cards off this. The card draw is different than Liara. Liara won't allow you to play lands. This will allow you to draw lands and to play them and to hold on to them. Liara is going to force you to cast them right away, if you're going to cast them at all. So there's a little bit of give and take here. I think its most clear comparison is Liara, even though it's an equipment deck, and you would think, oh, this is like Rayav. It's actually a lot more like Liara. And so, yeah, give this a shot. I'm very curious. If you do end up making something you think is good, feel free to send it my way, and I'd love to take a peek at it because it does have a lot of ingredients that I like: the built-in protection, the card draw, the good colors for equipment. So, and then our final one, we have Ariel. We talked about this one last night. We're going to talk about it again. 4 mana, 4/4 vigilance. It makes 2/2 white night tokens with vigilance, and it kills things. Particularly, it kills combo creatures. And the reason that
Right.
is because it's about power. And so 1 power creatures are most of the combo creatures in the format are 1 or 0 power. Very few of them are even 2, which means that just Ariel alone in Battlefield can pay a black, tap it, tap a night to destroy something. You just need to have Ariel and one other night to start destroying things. This one very clearly wants to have lots of mana, and this is a mid range deck through and through. You have a commander that kills things. You have a commander that makes tokens. It's very commander centric. And I think you're just going to grind people to dust. You're going to play black white. You're going to reanimate things with Breath of Life, False Defeat, Resurrection, Late to Dinner, with Dread Return. Maybe Summon Undead. You're going to play all the cycling creatures. You're just going to play good white black good stuff. It's going to be like Denethor. You could take the Denethor deck and just slap it into Ariel, and it's probably just play just fine. Right? You probably could win games with it. What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
Ariel?
I think most aristocrats or Zav type builds would work fine with this. I'm not as high on it for cPDH. Just because I'm looking at it and thinking you're probably waiting till turn 5 before you really have any kind of game plan. And with the format getting faster, that's hard. I also think that Ariel is probably a really big removal magnet. The upside is that you can, in response to removal, you can activate one of those abilities, which is nice. I think personally that the way I'd want to go with this is with a Knight's Tribal type build. I think that's probably where you're going to get your best payoffs.
And there aren't even good Knight Tribal cards, right? Like you have Westfold Rider. There's like Smitten Swordmaster. You have some Knights. There's like less than 10, right?
Yeah, Swordmaster is one. Knighted Mirror is a very good one. I'm also very high on. I think we're all high on Goliath Paladin, and Goliath Paladin
That's
is
the
a
best knight there is.
and there's some very like interesting ones with flanking, and flanking is a much better ability than it first appears.
Yep.
And then White also has like a lot of very good Ardenvale Tactician's another one. White has a lot of very good ETB Create a Knight type creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So those are very strong. I think that there's really cool potential for this to be a really fun casual PDH deck. And I would want to do it with a Knight Tribal theme. That being said, for cPDH, for the reasons I already mentioned, not as high on it. It's 4 mana. You're starting on turn 5 probably, and you're just putting a huge removal magnet out there.
Yeah.
Like your commander probably reads the rest of the pod, untap next turn and kill my thing. So
and I think that's actually going to be a really interesting dynamic to navigate, because depending on how many knights you have in play is going to tell people what you can and can't kill and whether they need to kill Ariel or not. So that's why I think actually that Knight Tribal is a trap. If you are going into Knight Tribal, I think that's the casual route, because in competitive, what you want to do is you want to justify your position at the table by holding the combo player underwater until the bubbles stop. And you're basically saying, I have these knights in play, I can kill these combo creatures, but I can't really kill anything else with it. But in the meantime, I'm making 2/2s, I'm attacking people, they've got vigilance, so I'm hard to pressure, and I've got other forms of removal in the deck too, and lots of card advantage that I can grind with. So I think that you're right that it is that removal on a commander tends to be a removal or counterspell magnet. Think like Armix. If you have Armix, you got to be playing like what's her name? Not Pasheen. Grants protection from.
Rebek.
Rebek. Yep, Rebek. So like Armix needs to be with Rebek, or it needs to be with Essior, for the sole purpose of saying like this card is so threatening to the people at the table because it's just gonna kill something every single turn, that they're gonna spend a counterspell or a removal spell on it early when you're vulnerable, to prevent themselves from losing more cards later on, right?
Right.
And that's good math. Like that's the math you want to be doing. This card, if you don't play Knights Tribal, is actually saying like, I'm going to control the pneumatic walls, I'm going to control the untappers, I'm going to control the scouts. But the other things, I'm going to kill with my good black and white removal, right? So I think there's a way to navigate it where we don't have to play this commander that is going to die on sight because it can kill anything once it lands. I don't think it will kill anything once it lands. It's not going to kill a ton of different things. So I'm actually, I think I'm pretty bullish on this on this commander, I'm just seeing like I just love the Orzhov good stuff because the reanimator is so redundant. It's like they kill or counter your initiative and you just like reanimate it. You cycle away these creatures, you get lands, you bring them on back with Reaping the Graves. You get Pestilence to end the game or to catch up when you're behind. You get white for cards like Righteous Aura, which are such a hoser against people playing any sort of Voltron strategy. Pretty much ends the game if they're not in colors that can handle it. And so I really like Orzhov as a color pair in this particular format for mid-range and for control. And I think that this commander does that very well. There's probably some ways that we can untap this too, like um, Triclopian Site, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, so Triclopian Site will do it. Village Bellringer will do it. Mobile Garrison will do it. Wings of the Cosmos. The new one, I think it's Escape from Orthanc or something like that from Lord of the Rings will do it. Dauntless Avon will do it. So there's a lot of white cards that can untap something. So yeah, there's definitely options there.
Yeah, yeah. So we got to go color equals white. Although we could also look at black too.
Yep.
So this is untap. So we get Beacon Hawk
You can
can
have damage. Yeah.
yeah. Um, untap target non-white. I mean, we'd be looking for ways to do this repeatedly.
Call to Glory, that's the other good one.
Which one?
Call to Glory. You were just hovering.
Call to Glory. Oh yeah.
Because you want to not only untap.
To kill more than one thing. Interesting. Yeah, and then we've also got these attack triggers where with the attack trigger on the stack, you can tap, destroy something, and then untap it, and then hold it up again. The fact that it's only 1 mana is a big part of that. So that's definitely pretty cool. It'd be interesting to look deeper into this and see what we've got. But I think regardless, this is a commander. This is, to me, strikes me maybe as one of the more promising commanders that I've reviewed so far. And I'm interested to see what people do with it. So let's see. I think we are at the end here. We have reached the end of the road for the white cards in this set. Clearly, this set was complete gas for white. It brought combo into white. It's giving it more removal that are and actively good. It's like cut down level removal or Charge of the Mites or Hobbit Sting, like that kind of stuff where it's like, oh, I think I could play that in just about any white deck and I want it because it's instant speed. We're also getting some rather unique effects. Like if we go back here, we're going to go back here and take a look at we've got the supply runners, right? Giving us a way to buff our entire team. It's pretty massive. We're getting basically another impetus card, which is already great. I mean, so much of this is just like adding redundancy to this format. And that is what every set does. Every set when you play Pauper Commander is just adding more of what you already wanted. Yep. Making your deck that much more consistent. And then kind of going back to the beginning, we have these token generators, and then we have all the glitters. I mean, this stuff is just wildly powerful. So based on what we've seen here, what do you anticipate we're going to get more of in the future?
I think I think the redundancy that you mentioned is probably spot on. I think we're going to see more of the redundancy. I'm hopeful moving forward that we continue to see more of these 2-mana pacifism effects, maybe a little bit more quality target removal, maybe something akin to a board wipe, a very conditional one. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of these artifact synergies, because I think that that's a really neat thing for white to be doing.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see what comes next. We have Wilds of Eldraine coming soon. What will white look like for them is a very interesting question.
And will Eldraine be as broken as it was last time? Hopefully.
Hopefully. Probably. I don't know. I think that they realize, we went too far. they might dial it back.
People have emotional damage from the last Eldraine. But I mean, the funny thing is that, while other formats do suffer when they push the power level, we don't.
Right. Right.
We love pushed sets because
Yes, especially this one. This one has given us some good gas. So
totally.
I'm looking forward to more artifact synergy, better removal. Just keep doing the things that white already does well. And yeah, I'm very excited for what we saw here. There were some things I had on my wish list that I didn't get, but you know what? I'm not complaining because there were things that I didn't think that were going to get downshifted that were. So I'm pretty pleased. And if you're somebody who plays mono white and cEDH, or you're just a mono white player in general, and you're like, is cPDH, does it have the cards? Does it have the gas? If that was a question before, I don't think it is anymore. So
Yeah, yeah.
check it out.
And I think, like, there's some stuff on my downshift wish list that I'd actually like to share really quick before we sign off here. Let's take a look at this. This is the CPD or the downshift wish list that I've been maintaining, and I've had it. It says it's only been around for a couple of months, but I brought it over from like 4 different deck builders. So I've been thinking about this a lot for a long time, and some cards that I think I would really love to see looking forward is stuff like Abolish, some free
Mhm.
some free interaction on the part of white would be awesome. Intangible Virtue, please
It
give
would be
us
amazing.
this card. I want to play with Intangible Virtue so bad. Rally of Wings would be really cool too. Um,
WotC is very careful with anthems because they recognize just how powerful they can be. So if you notice, most anthems are usually set at like 3 mana. That one's 2 because it's conditional. It's not everything on your board. It's a pretty powerful effect. This is one of my disappointments. I was kind of hoping for an Adeline. And the reason I was
we'll
hoping for
get it
Adeline was
someday.
I'm hopeful. And this is why I'll explain it briefly. Adeline does a couple of things that we already have in our format. So Adeline's power equal to the number of creatures you control. Crusader of Odric, we have that at common. Used to be a commander. It does essentially the same thing. And then whenever you attack for each opponent, create a 1/1. We have that as a uncommon background already. So just putting those two together, it's effects that I already could put in a deck, and I just want to put it in the command zone. This would be very good as the way that this plays in cEDH is as a stack deck.
Yeah,
And so I would love to be able to take cards that I typically use for the control game plan, but be able to use them aggressively to go wide and go tall. This would be a fantastic downshift.
yeah. I would
And I
love
was
to
hoping
see that
for
one.
that, but I didn't see it.
Yeah, I think we're still gonna get it. The other cards that I really like in white are these modal
Yeah.
effects like this, and I think that I would really like to see more of these, where it's either like protection and destroy, or that kind of thing. Multiple different effects for pretty a reasonable cost. Destroying something big that you really care about while also having the ability to protect something is exactly what I'd love to see more of in white. Um, Another card that I would very much like to see this downshift is Dispatch. Um,
Mm, yep.
Dispatch would be such a cool card for white. It is Path to Exile with no downside if you have Metalcraft. And so for decks
Yep.
like GDP, giving them a good instant speed removal spell, or Mentor of the Meek if you had sufficient ramp, this would kind of be like a Galvanic Blast, right? And I think that
This would
it
be
wouldn't
very
it wouldn't break Pauper either, because it would go in decks that are already kind of strained for their removal slots. When you're playing Boros Synth or you're playing those Glinthawk Core Skyfisher decks, you don't really have space for another like 4 kill spells. You have Bolt and Galvanic Blast, like that's what you're playing. You might have another 2 with like Foundry Helix or something like that, but Dispatch would be really cool. And there's only certain decks that would be able to take advantage of it, and I think it would be super exciting. Um, I've gone on record saying I think both of these should be downshifted. I think there's plenty of people who disagree. It's definitely a hot take. One of the few hot takes that I deploy. And the impact on Pauper 60 card would be significant. However, we got to think about like what is like throttling Pauper right now? It's burn. So is it really that devastating if we get a card that allows us to gain life by killing one of our own creatures? It's gonna die to the Monastery Swiftspear with 4 power. I actually think that this card would not break the format. It would actually just be another good removal spell. Pauper has Brainstorm, it has Ponder, it has Preordain, it has Counterspell, it had Daze, it had Gush. It has Lightning Bolt and Galvanic Blast. It has Cast Down, which is like 2 mana destroy anything in that format. I don't understand why we can't have like Swords to Plowshares. Like, this idea that it's like too powerful for common is malarkey. Common has insanely powerful cards in it. Exhume is a common. Dread Return is now a common. Gutter Snipe is a common. Like, so I'd love to see this one. Path to Exile might be the more quote unquote reasonable because it has a downside to it. But I think those would be really cool. Banisher Priest, now that we have Alabaster Host Intercessor, I think this is a perfectly reasonable card to bring into the format. This would be another good one, and I'd like to see more of these.
Owing on a creature is like very strong. To be able to put that in the 99 would be very helpful.
Yeah, I would love that. Same with Fiend Hunter. And then look, we got Generous Gift. This was on the list. It was on the list. Nice. In fact, all the things that you see here that have already been downshifted were ones that I called. So it's kind of fun to go through here and look at them because I actually called Monastery Swiftspear. I think I had a lot of people think I was totally crazy. Like, no, that's not going to happen, Ryan. Come on. Yeah, like, get it back in your pants.
And nothing's gotten broken by it. Like, it was fine.
In 60 card, it's definitely, it's very good. It's very good.
It's good, but it hasn't completely like destroyed the meta. Now everybody has to try to game around Swiftspear. You know what I mean? Like it's fine.
Maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit. I think what we see is in cPDH, it doesn't matter. The card is not a player. In 60 card, it definitely is, I think, in some ways pretty meta defining because it took burn, which was like fine, and it made it like disgusting, right? But I think it's a card that, with something like Swords to Plowshares, well, it would see as much play as it would see in Legacy, which is not very much. It would still be played, but and then just some other stuff like Servo Exhibition. I think I also have a Danto Vanguard in here. I think would be a really cool card.
It would be fine.
Yeah, totally fine. Very cool for like a variety of reasons. Ajani's Pridemate would be great. Aven Mind Sensor, easy common. Easy common.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to take that at common. 100%.
And then Enlistment Officer is another one. There's a lot of good soldiers in the format. This would be really cool in Yoshin Tactician. And in fact, I have the whole cycle of these cards listed in here as well. There's a lot of fun stuff in here. So but with that, and I guess the last ones I want to mention was like Mortify, and the other one is Anguished Unmaking. I think those cards would also be great commons. They're expensive. They're flexible. They're instant speed, and Anguished Unmaking has a downside, and they're color specific. You have to be in a certain color to use them. So I think those would also be very cool cards to have available in the format. So anyways, with that said, I think we're going to wrap things up here. Your insight onto all these cards as it relates to our format, but also to cEDH, has been fascinating to absorb. I think your read on all of these cards has been super spot on, and I'm super excited to start playing with these cards. I have 125 decks, and all of them are going to need to change. Oh God. Heavy breath. But yeah, I do appreciate you coming on the show and once again giving us the rundown on Mono White.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, with that, we're going to do a quick shout out. I want to let you all know that we have a Patreon that you can support us there. But if you're not interested in the Patreon, just do the basic free thing. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment if you want to help us out that way. All those things are helpful for the algorithm and they're free for you to do. So take a moment to do that if you haven't done it already. And of course, if you are interested in joining our Patreon, patreon.com/common connoisseurs, we have the $2, $5, $10, $20, and $50 membership level here that allows you to support Clay and I in our mission to bring cPDH to the masses and really expand not only the depth of our knowledge, but the breadth of the things that we know are possible in the format. And I think, and we have 16 people who are doing that. So join them and get access to these incredible benefits. We have exclusive access to the Discord server, which is where Clay and I post our updates to the decks that we are kind of known for. So for example, TPI is about to get some changes. And if you want to get in early on exactly what it is that we're doing there, that's a great place to do it. If you want these templates here for either playing Mox Field playtest or for doing live streaming of your own, you can subscribe at the $10 a month level for even just a month, and I will give you these with your name customized down below. I've made all these myself, and it's a great way to get into it for a cheap price. You get early access to our recorded and edited videos, and of course you get our shout outs at the beginning or end of every video. So do consider supporting us on Patreon if it is within your ability to do so. And with that, we're going to follow up with one last thing, and that is to thank all of the Patreons for their contributions. So we've got the PDH Pod, the Sanctuary PDH, Jack, Eric, Adgan, Jerry, Zach, Scooby, Chris, Mizu, William, Paul, Corey, Derek, Devin, Ian, Bobby, Jin Shooting Star, and of course, Noyark. So thank you all so much for your support. It really means a lot to Clay and I when people support us like this, because it lets us know that we're on the right path, that we're doing the right thing, and that we're contributing to this community in a way that you think is valuable. So with that, we're going to sign off. Let's make sure we get you back in there. There we go. So with that said, Connoisseurs of Fine Common Cardboard, thank you so much for your time and your attention, your eyes and ears, your likes, your comments, and your support. And I really look forward to seeing you all on the battlefield. Hope you have a great day, and we'll catch you later. Peace.